The first locomotive built in Belgium. The story of Le Belge, exploring the machines that built Belgium. Today, trains are just part of the background of everyday life. We barely look up when one passes. But rewind 200 years, and a steam locomotive was one of the strangest, most powerful things a person could witness. Imagine standing at the edge of a field in 1835. You hear a distant hiss, then a rhythmic pounding, like the footsteps of something enormous. Smoke rises over the tree line, and then, out of nowhere, a machine of iron and wood comes thundering past, faster than any horse, pulling more weight than any team of animals ever could. That was the world Belgium stepped into in 1835, when it built its very first locomotive. Its name was Le Belge, simply the Belgian. But how did this machine actually work? Who had the ambition to build it? And why does a single locomotive, built almost 2 centuries ago, still matter to the story of Belgian technology today? Welcome to Belgium Retro Tech, exploring the machines that built Belgium. Let's go back to where it all began. A young country needs to move. To understand why Le Belge mattered, we need to understand the country that built it. In 1830, Belgium didn't exist yet as the nation we know today. It had just declared independence, breaking away and forming its own kingdom for the very first time. A brand new country faces a brand new problem. How do you actually hold it together? How do you connect cities that may have grown up almost like separate worlds, each with its own trade, its own industry, its own rhythm of life? At the time, the answer was roads, canals, and horse-drawn lichens. It worked, but it was slow, it was limited, and it could not keep up with what Belgium was about to become. Because Belgium wasn't just a young country, it was becoming an industrial one. Coal was being pulled from the ground. Iron was being forged into tools and machines. Factories were rising in places like Liège and Seraing. And an industrial nation has one urgent need above all others, the ability to move things, coal, iron, goods, and people, quickly, reliably, and in enormous quantities. Railways offered exactly that. Not a small improvement, but a revolutionary leap. Belgian industrialists saw this almost immediately, and one name stands above the rest: John Cockerill. Cockerill ran a sprawling industrial operation in Seraing, near Liège, an area that was fast becoming one of the beating hearts of iron and engineering in Europe. He didn't just see the potential of railways, he wanted Belgium to build them itself. The first Belgian railway. That ambition led to a historic date, May 5, 1835. On that day, Belgium opened its first railway line connecting Brussels and Mechelen. Picture the scene. Crowds gathering, many of them seeing a train for the very first time in their lives. To them, this wasn't just a new form of transport, it was a glimpse of the future arriving early. But here's the detail that mattered most for our story. The locomotives used on that opening day hadn't been built in Belgium at all. They had been imported from Britain, the birthplace of the steam railway. For a country determined to become an industrial power in its own right, that was a problem. Belgium didn't just want to use railway technology, it wanted to build it. Belgian engineers and industrialists, Cockerill chief among them, set out to prove that Belgian workshops could produce a locomotive just as capable as anything coming from Britain. And that ambition is exactly where the story of Le Belge begins. The birth of Le Belge. On December 30th, 1835, just months after that historic opening day, the first locomotive built entirely in Belgium rolled out of John Cockerill's workshops in Seraing. Its name was Le Belge, the Belgian. The design borrowed heavily from the work of the British engineer Robert Stephenson, one of the true pioneers of early railway engineering. There was no shame in that. Stephenson's designs were the gold standard of the era. But building on Stephenson's ideas is very different from simply importing his machines. Le Belge proved something much bigger, that Belgian industry had the skill, the precision, and the capability to manufacture advanced railway technology itself. For a country barely 5 years old, that was an extraordinary statement to make. It said, we are not just going to use the technology of the industrial age, we are going to build it. How did Le Belge actually work? So let's get into the machine itself. How did Le Belge actually move? Like every steam locomotive of its era, the entire system relied on one deceptively simple idea: turning heat into motion. Coal was burned inside a firebox. That heat boiled water inside a large boiler. As the water turned to steam, it built up enormous pressure. That pressurized steam was then directed into cylinders, where it pushed pistons back and forth. Those pistons were connected to the locomotive's driving wheels, so as the pistons moved, the wheels turned, and as the wheels turned, the entire machine rolled forward. It sounds almost simple when you say it slowly like that, but in 1835, this was the cutting edge of human engineering. Belge had what's called a 1A1 wheel arrangement, a single driving axle in the middle of the locomotive with supporting axles at the front and rear to help balance and guide it along the track. Its driving wheels were substantial, approximately 1.524 meters in diameter. That's taller than most people. And the construction itself tells you a lot about the era. The frame wasn't pure iron and steel like later locomotives. It used oak wood reinforced with iron plates, a hybrid of old craftsmanship and new industrial materials. Now, picture standing beside this machine in 1835. The hiss of escaping steam, the rhythmic clank of the pistons, smoke curling up into the sky, the sheer size of those iron wheels, turning with a slow, deliberate power. For most people watching, this would have been the single most powerful machine they had ever seen in their lives. Not a distant idea from a newspaper article, a real, roaring, moving thing right in front of them. It's hard to overstate how strange and thrilling that must have felt. Early technology, early problems. Of course, none of this technology was perfected yet. Railways in the 1830s were still figuring themselves out. Take something as basic as connecting a locomotive to the wagons behind it. Today, couplings are engineered to be smooth and controlled. In the early days, connections often relied on simple chains. That sounds minor until you think about what happens when a chain suddenly goes taut. Starting the train or stopping it could send a hard, jarring jerk through every single wagon in the line. Anyone riding behind the locomotive would have felt every bit of that.
This was powerful technology, but it was also raw and unrefined. Every part of the system, the boiler, the wheels, the couplings, even the tracks themselves, was still being worked out through trial, error, and hard-won experience. And that's part of what makes machines like Belge so fascinating to look back on. They weren't polished, they weren't perfected. They were the very beginning of something enormous, a technology that would go on to reshape how humans move, trade, and live, but that in 1835 was still finding its feet. Belge didn't disappear overnight. It stayed in service for decades, doing exactly the job it was built for. But technology doesn't stand still. As the years passed, newer and more powerful locomotives were designed and built, each one an improvement on what came before. Eventually, in 1869, more than 3 decades after it first rolled out of Cockerill's workshop, Belge was retired from service. By then, it belonged to a different era of railway history. The machine itself became a piece of the past, but its importance never really faded. Belge had already done the one thing that truly mattered. It proved, once and for all, that Belgium could design and build its own railway technology. And that proof became the foundation for everything that came after. Today, if you saw Belge sitting in a museum, you might just see an old steam locomotive, oak and iron, quiet and still. But its story represents something much bigger than one machine. It represents the moment a brand new country decided it wasn't going to simply borrow the technology of the industrial age, it was going to build its own. From that first locomotive in Seraing, to sprawling iron factories, to the engineering marvels that followed, Belgium's technological history is full of these turning points, quiet moments that ended up shaping an entire industrial identity. And here at Belgium Retro Tech, that's exactly what we're here to explore. This is Belgium Retro Tech, exploring the machines that built Belgium. If you love forgotten machines, old technology, and the stories behind them, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more history like this still to uncover. In the next episode, we'll dig into another piece of Belgium's forgotten technological past. See you in the next one.